Not long after Mattel Creations bought Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends from Hit Entertainment, that changes came in, and that big change was Big World Big Adventures, aka Series 22. This series, alongside the Big World Big Adventures movie, marks the third major reboot of the franchise, following the introduction of the Steam Team in Series 8 and the show switching over to full CGI in Hero of the Rails. Both productions were the result of a market research Mattel conducted with audiences around the globe. It was about how Mattel could keep Thomas and Friends relevant in a competitive market, as well as reversing declining toy sales. So is Big World Big Adventures aka Series 22 as bad as people intended it? Let's have a look. The series was split into two halves. One half with Thomas travelling around the world, visiting China, India and Australia, and the other half taking place on the island of Sodor. So what are my opinions on the 22nd series of the show? It's very hit and miss. Having watched these episodes myself, I could see why people were getting so angry with it. There were so many changes that a lot of people didn't like, including the bouncing of the engines which was introduced in Journey Beyond Sodor, and the various episodes that were very hit and miss in a lot of people's minds. Very much like Journey Beyond Sodor and the Big World Big Adventures movie, the bouncing is really distracting and very unrealistic and just takes away from the realism of the show. And having watched some of the episodes myself, I've come to my own conclusion with the series. I find it to be very hit and miss. I see it as being like Series 8 of the show. The new creators trying something new with it and didn't really work out very well. And I do honestly find it interesting to see Thomas travelling around the world in half of the series, like him visiting various other countries, seeing what the animators could achieve at bringing these exotic countries to life. Like seeing the outbacks of Australia is just gorgeous, the deserty type fields of India, and the beautiful settings of China. It's just the sort of thing that could transport kids into these places with Thomas the Tank Engine. At first I thought that the episodes where Thomas is in a different country will probably take place during the movie. But as I started to watch them over and over again, I thought that can't be it. As soon as it was announced, and after watching Big World Big Adventures the movie, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is going to sort of take place during the movie with the cross-country episodes, and the Sodor episodes are going to take place after the movie. That's interesting. But since there's no Neo in sight in the cross-country episodes, it's obvious that this takes place after the movie. Since Neo's nowhere to be seen in any of these cross-country episodes with Thomas, there's no way this took place in the movie. It's obvious that this must have taken place sometime after the movie. That makes no sense, since Thomas has already been around the world in the movie. And I just thought it was kind of pointless to set these cross-country episodes after the movie, because having them set in between the movie, like some scenes of the movie that we never got the time to see, would have been even better. Just showing what kind of other adventures Thomas would have got up to with Neo across the world that we never got to see in the movie. But no, they had to write it so that Thomas went around the world again, even though he'd already did it before. Another thing that people really hate about this series is that they're downgrading on the realism and focusing a little bit more on the imaginative, exaggerated, cartoony type stuff. One of the hugest changes of the series was removing Mark Morgahan as the narrator and replacing him with Thomas the Tank Engine telling the stories to the audience. Now this is a huge disappointment for me because Thomas the Tank Engine has always had a Liverpudlian doing the narrations in the UK, from Ringo Starr to Michelangelis and to Mark Morgahan. And having Thomas make an introduction and an ending as well as a few narrations during the episodes isn't terrible, it's just not the original narration that we're used to. So it can be really distracting when you don't get the original narrator in there. Another change was that the fact that Bill and Ben's original voice actor, Jonathan Broadbent, departed from the series, so he had to be replaced with two other actors, Ramses Hardbiker and Matt Wilkinson. And even though you could tell that it's not Jonathan Broadbent, they do a pretty good job of bringing these characters to life. I just wish they'd kept Jonathan Broadbent around. And let's talk about those infamous fantasy sequences throughout the episodes. In each episode, one of the characters has a random fantasy sequence that relates to the story. Like Gordon has this pink elephant-esque nightmare about the Fat Controller making silly changes to the railway, Rebecca having various contraptions attached to her to make her more interesting, Thomas meeting up with a giant panda that's literally a giant teddy bear, Thomas having a fantasy about him and Rosie falling out of a tree from a leaf. That doesn't really make any sense, but just go with it anyway. And the episode An Engine of Many Colours is set around daydreams, or I should say nighttime dreams, where James has various dreams about what it would be like if he was painted different colours other than red. And the results are pretty bad. And one big missed opportunity in this series is not including more foreign engines in the background. I mean, okay, you do see some other engines working in the backgrounds in the various countries, but let's be honest, they're just recolorings of Henry and Oliver most of the time. And especially when there's so many other different types of steam locomotives that you could have used in the background for these different countries. Like, I've watched this old documentary video about Australian railways in Victoria, and I've seen so many locomotives there, like the J classes, the R classes and the D3 classes. I mean, it would have been nice to have seen these in the background once in a while whenever Thomas was in Australia, just to show that these type of engines exist in the Thomas universe. Not showing some of these Australian classes like the R's, the J's and the D3s in the show is really a missed opportunity. And it's something that the TV series producers really ought to look into for next time. The series also introduced us to many new characters. There's Rebecca, a large tender engine who originates from the mainland, aka England, who helps Gordon pull the express during busy periods. Despite her size, Rebecca is shy, but not afraid to stand up for herself, and is not intimidated by the other engines. At times she feels the need to be on the same level as the other engines, which can sometimes make her anxious or over hasty. But despite her insecurities, Rebecca loves to see the best in everyone, and all of her friends appreciate her kindness and enthusiasm. And she's voiced by Rachel Miller, who brings the character to light in such a delightful manner. I mean, every time I hear this character talk, she just seems like the kind of woman that you'd really want to have a conversation with and never get tired of. And I absolutely love her design. It's taken from these old Battle of Britain class locos that were made in the 1950s for the Southern Railway. But I really think it's a missed opportunity that she wasn't painted green like the original engine she was based on. But in another way, the yellow does kinda suit her personality. So she's a character that I really would love to see more often in the show. There's Hong Mail, a Chinese tank engine that Thomas met during his stay in China. She's a good-natured but cheeky tank engine from China who loves to race. She is also blue like Thomas and out to prove that she's the #1 blue engine. Like Thomas, she could be careless and hasty at times, but always tries to make up for it. Hong Mei is also a good sport and knows when to put competition aside for the sake of helping a friend. And she just looks gorgeous. I really love the type of engine they used for her design. There's An An and Yin Yon, two Chinese coaches that Thomas meets during his visit in China, who usually work along him with passenger ones. Both coaches are cheerful and bring out an engine's friendliness, and due to working all around China, they have an extensive knowledge of the country's roots. And some people may describe them as the Chinese versions of Annie and Clara if they were boy and girl rather than girl and girl. And I can honestly see why they would make these kind of comparisons, since they look very similar to Annie and Clara despite having different faces and coming from another country. But it is really nice to see how these two work off with Thomas, and it's quite entertaining at times. There's Noor Jahan, an Indian diesel engine who is known for taking visitors on a tiger safari. Unlike Rajiv, a character who I'll get to later, Noor Jahan does not let her decorative looks go to her head and berates the former for his pompous attitude. She is also calm and down to earth. Isla, an Australian flying doctor airplane, befriends Thomas during his visit in Australia. She is always ready for an emergency and has helped many in times of need, but does not like to brag about it. She is a kind and respectful plane who takes her job very seriously. There's Tamika, an Australian steam rail motor. She's a rough and tough tourist train who is passionate about the animals of the rainforest and tries to protect them. And I find her design quite interesting because it's not like any steam engine design I've ever seen. I mean, you can see the definite Australian parts of it with the cow catcher, since a lot of Australian engines have that. And when I first saw her, I honestly thought she was going to be a narrow gauge engine like Duncan. But no, she's standard gauge. And she looks gorgeous in my eye, and I'd really love to see her more often in the series. And there's also Shankar, an Indian diesel shunter who works on the Indian Railway. He is wise and sympathetic, but also serious and blunt, always going straight to the point. If there is a way to set things right, he can be counted on to carry it out. He also takes no nonsense from slackers or show-offs, often scolding Thomas for his occasional lack of focus, and Ranjit for his attitude. Despite this, he always enjoys a good laugh. There's also Dexter, an old brake coach who was abandoned in an overgrown siding until he was rediscovered by Duck and restored as a classroom. Dexter is a coach that is just as much optimistic as he is colourful. Even when left on the side and out of use and in poor condition, he kept a positive outlook on his situation. He now resides at Harwick Station in case the children of Arsborough need a classroom to attend. A very interesting thing about this character is that he's voiced by former narrator Mark Morgahan, so it's really nice that the team at Mattel are keeping him on despite him not being the narrator anymore. It's just a really nice touch. Some of the new characters are really interesting to its credit, and I really love Rebecca in the show. We also get to see some characters from the Great Race return to the show. Like obviously Ashima comes back, but we already know about her since she had a huge spotlight in the movie, so there's no point talking about her again. But two characters that really do get their chance to shine in this series is Ranjiv and Shane. Ranjiv, the Indian tank engine, is rather arrogant and vain, believing himself to be a royal engine due to his crown. He often makes patronising or belittling remarks to the other engines, but his heart is in the right place. He has a good sense of humour and he does care for his friends deep down, though he will often be sensitive if it comes close to his crown getting lost or damaged. Once he had a panic attack when the former happened. It is possible Ranjiv's overinflated self-importance may mask some insecurity, as he felt useless without his crown. Shane, the Australian engine, is a big, strong engine who has been working tirelessly to ensure he's in the best shape. Known as the Whispering Giant, Shane's carefree ways make him many friends. Shane can usually be found as a tour guide in the outback with Aubrey and Aidan, his coaches, cracking jokes to the tourists, though he can prioritise fun over common sense, landing him in trouble. And Shane just looks amazing. It's just an amazing choice for his basis. And it was also an engine that got to run alongside the Flying Scotsman during its tour around Australia. And if they decide to have Shane visit Sodor in the future, I would really love to see him interact with Flying Scotsman and make a reference to how both their classes worked together in Australia years ago. That would just be a great opportunity and a missed one if Mattel doesn't take it to their advantage. And like Shane, his coaches are sensible with a sense of humour. They both admire Isla. Like any coaches, they don't take any nonsense from their engine. Some episodes being pretty decent, and other episodes making it seem like Series 8 to 16 all over again. Now if I had to pick some favourite episodes from this series, one would have to be Forever and Ever because of Gordon's tantrum about the changes the Fat Controller made to the railway, like Henry and Edward moving out of Timmer's sheds. And I think this pretty much sums up how a lot of the fans reacted when they were taken out of the Steam team. A pretty entertaining episode, especially considering the fact that it was written by Andrew Brenner. Confusion Without Delay is another favourite because it introduces us to Rebecca, a character who I love to see in the show and look forward to seeing more of. I also love how in this episode that Flying Scotsman comes back and has interactions with Gordon and Rebecca. So it's really nice to see him appear in episodes rather than specials, and I hope that this continues throughout the series. Especially with my idea of him meeting Shane and then talking about how they were in Australia together years ago. Trusty Trunk is another favourite of mine because it shows some realism on the Indian railways, like having elephants help out with the rescuing of engines when they come off the tracks. And I'm not joking, that actually did happen in real life. And I know, I did some research. Thomas in the Wild is a guilty pleasure of mine because I think it's adorable seeing those baby panda cubs in the end of the episode. It's just so adorable. An Engine of Many Colours is another favourite because I feel like this is an episode that was intended for Series 21 before the team made the writers hold back on it to make room for the next series and the movie. It just shows St. James's story that took place in between the fastest red engine on Sodor and a new shed for Edward. Seeing is Believing is a nice episode because it brings back Merlin from Journey Beyond Sodor, and it's really nice to have the scene at the end where he talks to Trevor the Traction Engine, a character that hadn't been seen that much in a while. Apology Impossible is another favourite because I love how Philip stands up for himself with James after his boasting and arrogant nature takes the best of him. I quite like Samson and the Fireworks because it reminds me of how I used to be scared of fireworks when I was a kid. And seeing Cyril the Fogman again since Series 6 is just awesome. Rosie is Red is another favourite of mine because of the things I mentioned in my Thomas and Rosie's friendship review, so you'll have to go back to that to get the full details of it. So in conclusion, I see Series 22, aka Big World Big Adventures, as being like Series 8. The team trying out something new and it not exactly working very well. But if they really put their minds to it, they can make it work in the future if they really put their heads together and think about it. And definitely bring back more Railway series stories. The show needs those to come back. So not really what I would watch a million times over and over again, But if you're interested in seeing other countries in Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends and new engines, then this would be something to check out. So check it out for yourselves and get your own opinions out there.
Just a train wreck.